run through Morris's CV, which is quite a lengthy one, Morris. I'll just going to pull out the core parts here. So Morris matriculated from Pretoria Boys High School in 2007. He proceeded to further his studies through the Tshwane University of Technology, where he attained his National Diploma in Logistics. To supplement his national diploma, Morris completed certificates in business management, multidisciplinary concepts in railway engineering, project management, and the list continues. Morris epitomizes building a career from the ground up, having started his career at Grindrod as an intern in the Graduate Opportunity and Leadership Development Program back in 2013. The program exposed him to various subsectors within the logistics industry, including rail, ports and terminals, and a container depot. At the end of the program, he was one of the fortunate interns to be absorbed into the work environment, and he was placed within Grindrod Rail as a commercial analyst. After servicing the organization for 2 years, he was afforded the opportunity to join the Transport Education Training Authority as assistant to the Chief Executive Officer. In 2019, Morris joined Traxtion as a business development officer and grew and developed the position to such an extent that he was promoted to the position of business development manager, supporting the commercial director and the commercial team as a whole. Morris is passionate about logistics, which has led him to gather knowledge through furthering his studies and experience through practical day-to-day work and workplace interactions, to enrich his understanding of rail logistics and supply chain management and how they relate to the economy at large. Through the knowledge and experience acquired over the years, Morris has set himself up for the continued success within the rail logistics sector. His career is on an upward trajectory, and his story should serve as motivation to never despise small beginnings. So welcome, Morris. And I'd like to now hand over to Gavin, just to give a few judges' comments around the Calabash entry.
Oh, thanks very much, Liesl. Hello, Morris, and I'm glad to hear your career isn't in a siding, that it's actually on an upward trajectory. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have with rail. It's on a siding, but we'll get to that at some stage, getting it out of the siding. So from a judge's point of view, there are a couple of things I'd really like to touch on. And one of the important things about this entry is that for the judges, it gave a lot of hope in terms of rail, in terms of what was possible and what some people were doing. And it would be really, really nice if we could get this out far further into the whole logistics field, get government to see it. Morris, I don't know if government has seen it so that they understand what is possible. And that was really inspiring for the judges. And there were a couple of things that we looked at as judges in terms of each entry. So, for example, things like how did your company benefit, which is important, but there were other aspects that Traxtion did very well on in terms of this Calabash entry, and that was clients and their references, their experience of how rail worked and what it did for them. More importantly, the long-term possibilities that existed and how this could grow and how this could get other modes to work. And one of the wonderful things about this entry was it gave tangible proof that this wonderful word we use in South Africa, intermodalism, I think that's how you pronounce it, where road and rail and sea and air and everybody get together and they take something and they move it along a logistics corridor from the client to the next client, onto the producer or back to the producer or to the consumer. That was probably the highlight of this entry. Yes, it worked on their bottom line. It showed how you could facilitate growth. And we all know we need to have growth in this country. We need to get away from our 2% or 1% growth that we're looking at over the next couple of years. This entry showed that we can do it. It's not an insurmountable mountain. Lots of benefits for the people who work for them and for the communities. I mean, I had a couple of questions around, you hear that the former CEO of Transnet said, oh, if rail comes into play, lots of people in the road industry are going to lose their jobs. That isn't what came out of this presentation from Traxtion. It was very clear that there is so much interconnectivity, so many skills that can go across the modes, and so much scope for development. So what it was doing, not only for their people, but for the community, the broader logistics community and the country, or should I say what it could do, gave us as judges an incredible ray of hope that yes, we can solve a number of the critical issues in terms of logistics in this country. And we don't need to wait for government to come around and do that. It was a fantastic entry, really, really was. The types of beacons of light we need in the logistics industry in the country. Once again, well done, guys. It really was a great entry to actually judge, and I look forward to seeing how this is going to grow as we go on. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Gavin. I guess the next part of the session would be to hand over to you, Morris, just to share your amazing case study with us. And once again, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you to the Africa Supply Chain Excellence Awards. And good afternoon, everybody. Just please excuse my voice. I tried to be romantic and buy some flowers for my wife, and ended up with pollen infection. So if I clear my throat now and again, please just excuse that. Gavin, thanks so much for the introduction. You touched on a few points around the intermodalism, and you're absolutely right, because this operation is actually has unlocked benefits downstream for various players in the supply chain who have to feed these terminals that then load these trains. So there's a lot of great collaboration with our customers happening there. The Calabash customers have really come to the party by believing in this service from day one in 2018. But we'll get to that later. So on that note, I'm just going to start and get out the siding, as you say, Kevin. Okay, so what we've got here. So just so you know what's to come, this is just going to take you through what actually Calabash is and how it came about, and then what the solution was that led to this service being put together and achieving what it has achieved, and sort of take you through some of the results, what we've learned through the way, and what has happened since we won the award. So Calabash is essentially a joint venture between Calabash Freight and Traxtion, which is a South African company, and we've got also our partners in Zambia and Tanzania. The whole idea was to have an integrated rail service company that can look at transporting freight on a specific corridor that is named the TAZARA corridor, that is running in between Tanzania and Zambia. So that's the port of Dar es Salaam and the Ndola, New Kapiri, Mposhi sort of area. So both companies have got extensive experience in rail, in freight services, and putting together solutions for the continent that actually work and add value. So from Traxtion's perspective, it's been around for three decades, and is really a market leader when it comes to private rail services and solutions. And that's the sort of ingredients that were put together to make up this Calabash venture. So if we take a look at the actual infrastructure itself, you'll see there that it's over 1,600 kilometers long, and it was built quite a long time ago. We can get into the current condition that it's in, but it essentially links the landlocked countries of the DRC and Zambia to a port, and that port being port of Dar es Salaam. So the construction happened, and it was then taken on by both governments because it spans the landmass of both those countries. But as time went on, it was then kind of decided that we need to introduce more capacity on this line, because when you build a piece of infrastructure, it's got a nameplate capacity, and when that capacity becomes a challenge to meet or exceed, you then look to the stakeholders to say, how can we have more volumes on this line? So that then brought about the opportunity, which was first, brought about by the problem, actually, which was not fully utilizing this piece of infrastructure. So then the TAZARA, which is the owners of this railway corridor, decided that we need to bring in the private sector in order to allow more investments into the piece of railway line, in order to allow investments into the people, into the assets that support it, like your workshops and maintenance, and essentially boost that utilization of the line, which would result in obviously more fees that are paid to the owner, and we can get into how that kind of system works, and it's kind of called an open access model, or third party, as it's been coined here locally. So Calabash was really the forerunner there, in that it was the first private operator to be given these rights to operate on this infrastructure. That did not come easy. It was a lot of a trial and error, more especially in the beginning, because you can imagine having to mobilize assets into countries, import permits. I saw we've got our CFO of International, who's just joined on the line as well. She and the rest of the team. I saw Johan as well, and some of our other stakeholders who are on here. So these are all the people who had to come together to make this happen. So what it then meant is that we can really have an impact in the area, more especially if you look at the copper volumes that this area generates. You've got a lot of mines in the DRC with copper, and the border posts are notorious for kilometers of lines of trucks waiting to cross. So what a rail solution does is that it allows this freight to move almost seamlessly through these border crossings, because in ideal cases, you'd find that the cargo is pre-cleared for the next border. So if you look at the opportunities that this slide kind of just summarizes, I think I touched on the volumes in the copper belt itself, and that this region really needed a transport solution that worked. And unfortunately, rail was not meeting the needs of all of the customers, and even the mines that sometimes need a workable solution before they can press the green button on the investment decisions. You'd often find that after prospecting and finding certain minerals, without a workable transport solution, that mine is likely to sit up until there's a economically feasible way to extract the minerals and transport it to the nearest port for export. I think I touched on some of the hurdles earlier, but when you mobilize into a new jurisdiction, you kind of have to ask yourself, what is there? What are the tax laws there? What's this copper market? Can the price support this rate? What sort of supply chain do we set up to support this operation? How do we justify to shareholders that you're going to deploy over $30 million of rolling stock into an area that perhaps is perceived to be quite risky? And, is there even return cargo? So those are some of the questions we had to ask ourselves in the beginning. But Calabash is made up of resilient people, innovative people, strong also management team that is able to secure the type of contracts you need to be able to overcome some of these hurdles. So then when the solution was put together and the investment case was there, it was now time for the the wheels to hit the track, so to speak. And you know, this operation really took advantage of the relationships it has, of the people it has, and of the strong customer base that it was able to secure. So some of the things that were done to get things going included, you know, getting teams to run in a caboose, you know, which was something that we are proud of and think it's quite innovative for those not in railways. You know, a caboose is like it's like a normal carriage for passengers. So instead of swapping the drivers out along this 2,000-kilometer stretch where you'd have to drive a kumbi there to relieve the crew, you then have the crew and some of the technicians sleeping on the train. I think if you look at that picture, you'll see two locomotives, and behind there in green, that's the where the caboose features, and the crew would be in there. It also helps if you have a breakdown in the middle of nowhere, where the technician can just hop out and look at what's wrong on the locomotive, possibly try and fix it right there and then, as opposed to having to wait for support to come from sometimes, you know, 500, 600 kilometers away. So that's some of, you know, the strategies that we thought were quite innovative for this service. Also, assets are quite important in the railway space. You know, it's often mentioned that you know, you need the right horse for the right cause. So the terrain between these two countries is it varies from being absolutely flat to going through some very twisty curves, and the topography is quite a challenge. So you need locomotives that will not fail you in operation, because, you know, if that happens, the customer loses confidence, and the vessels at the end of the day, they're waiting at the port for the all important cargo. So these assets that we deployed, we started with some GE C30 locomotives, which are, you know, brilliant locomotives. But as the years went on, we swapped them out with what you see in there, which are the Euro 4000s, or otherwise known as Afro 4000s as well. You know, we had to make some modifications to the brakes to allow them to be used for freight applications. So that's very good assets, still in the country right now, running very well. We also needed to support this operation. I think I touched on the supply chain. You know, the supply chain does a phenomenal job, if you can imagine how far it is away, and how many locomotive components there are that make up, you know, a complete unit. We're talking turbos, traction motors, brushes, and even your day-to-day consumables. You know, even something as simple as a filter needs to be there. We need to keep an eye on stock levels, and it's really a challenge, but it's not a challenge that was insurmountable. And our supply chain, you know, together with our partners in the freight forwarding, because they have to obviously import these parts into the country, have done a phenomenal job to ensure that we always have the right parts at the right place when they're needed. So, you know, that element is quite important to support a rail operation, because once your locals stand, you lose money, your clients lose money. But you know, those are sort of the things that we implemented there, and a lot of collaboration took place. Obviously, as I mentioned, for example, we've got a maintenance facility that we are, as Calabash, using from the TAZARA the state-owned, as you can call it, the owners of the infrastructure. So it's not easy to move into a new jurisdiction and say, I'm going to put up $1 million facility there. You sort of have to collaborate and say, when I need maintenance, may I use your facility? And it's, you know, it's a commercial discussion there on in, but those are some of the things, and you learn you learn from the locals in terms of what's possible, and that's the sort of collaboration. It goes beyond collaborating with customers, but also with the network owner itself, and we're really appreciative of the sort of support they've given us in the use of some of their facilities and fueling facilities as well. Amazing work that's being done there jointly. Some of the more innovative things is like we introduced a swing set of containers, because what we found that there's a delay in the port. So what you don't want is your local waiting with a load for that load to be unloaded before you leave. So additional investments were made so that we can have swing sets, which are essentially additional wagon sets that would be dropped off and the crew is changed, and the train can leave again with the same sort of locos, but the loaded wagons stay at the port for offloading. That really helps to maximize your tonnages and improve efficiency. So at the end of the month, you end up with more tonnages than you would have had if you waited for that train or that load to be unloaded. So obviously this took time, because you first have to realize that you have a problem and why aren't these trains turning quick enough, and you have to investigate. So those are some of the operational excellence that we have within Calabash that was able to pick up the issues that we're having in terms of turnaround time. Real good stuff there. So, you know, what the team has achieved is truly phenomenal. And also, I think just to touch on it again, I cannot stress enough the contributions of the procurement team, because they're supporting an operation that is thousands of kilometers away, but you know, never short on anything. You know, you name it, oils and drums of oils and filters, as I mentioned earlier, but also the critical components. You know, it's always a pain point for a company to hold massive amounts of inventory. So you kind of have to have good working relationship and understanding between technical and supply chain and finance to say, how much of the critical space do we want to hold? And technical will say, no, listen, we are quite confident in our maintenance regime that it's rigorous enough for us to maybe, you know, reduce the stock level, free up some cash for other things. So it really is a team effort at the end of the day. I think I touched on the fact that we have quite a good working relationship with TAZARA. They allow us to use their workshop, and as you can see there, that some of the Calabash trains parked there, and some of the cabooses come in there for maintenance. You know, there's cranes, there's an inspection pit, because you need to look under your locomotive to be able to see some of the undercarriage, service the traction motors and the likes. But what it did as well is give exposure to the local technicians on working on some of these locos. You know, when I speak to the people on the ground, and like Johan, for example, is also online, and say, oh, what's the feeling like there? And when the trains pull in, there's an excitement, because this new generation type of locos, dual cab, as you can see, by the way, which is something not very common in this market, where you've got a dual cab freight locomotive. That's where you can drive it from either end. So the driver arrives on this side, but then he doesn't need to turn the train around because there are controls on either side. You know, these are wonderful locos, very comfortable. So the local technicians are also quite keen to have a look when these machines are being maintained, and that's an element of skills transfer and just working together there to achieve these results. I touched on the preloading, and I think it's something that really helped to gain efficiencies on this Calabash service. You know, yes, it did mean additional investments, but after some investigations, and before the investment was made, it was decided that it is in fact worth it to make the investments into additional wagons in order for the trains to turn around quicker. Oh, sorry, and just as in case you're wondering, it's 2 locomotives hauling 30 wagons and a caboose. So you can imagine those 30 wagons. It's 6 meter or 20-foot containers, which are put door to door because copper is quite a costly commodity. I think last time I checked, $7,000, $8,000 per ton. So you can imagine the just sheer value of this freight. So in order to secure it, we kind of put it door to door to minimize tampering. If it ever stops at a station, these containers are door to door, so you can't easily access it. That's sort of the train configuration we're running there. We've tried a number of train configurations, but that's, I believe, the optimal one that allows us to run without having to use a banker locomotive. And I'm getting a bit technical, but I'm just trying to demonstrate that it was trial and error. But at the end of the day, with working with the right people, right assets, we were able to solve those challenges. So the assets themselves, I think I touched on it earlier. They were or are Afro 4000s, but otherwise known as the Euro 4000. The 4000 denotes the horsepower that they have. So those are very, very powerful locomotives. That's just the diagram in terms of what the cab looks like. So you've got, controls on either end, and the main mechanics of the locomotives and the components sit in the middle. These locomotives, in our company newsletter, we asked one of the drivers. We've got this feature where a driver's asked about his loco. So apparently they are known as the Spanish lady, señoritas, because they're from Spain, Oslo, and now Stadler Rail. So they are loved by the drivers as well. So very good assets. Going back to when you have an operation, assets, people, and customers are definitely key. Just another point on innovation is that we, in the freight industry, what pays is what you can invoice for, and that's essentially your load. So if you are moving, if I can call it dead weight, you are taking away from what you can invoice. So something innovative that was introduced are these skeletal wagons, which have sort of a frame, and that frame is strong enough to support containers, but not overly engineered with unnecessary weight on the frame itself. So as you can see on the right there, you'll see some holes there. So there's no additional steel that kind of weighs it down, and that's kind of dead weight, but they're still structurally strong enough to carry the payload. So when you take away from that, you can add more into the container, and that's essentially more dollars that you can charge for the freight. So that's something that was introduced. We've got a mixture of normal flatbed wagons, but these as well do feature in the fleet of wagons that we have. They also result in a bit of a cost saving, because you're not hauling this additional weight that's not revenue earning. So that's another innovation that we have there. So then when we get to the sort of results we've seen, you see on that graph prior to 2014, prior to the introduction of open access, what the tonnages were like, and that's thousands. So you'll see that COVID kind of affected things a bit, but also there was a collapse of a bridge that affected the service. But generally speaking, the Calabash operation is contributing significantly to the volumes that are now moved on the corridor. Granted that it's not yet at capacity in terms of this, it's actually a long way away from capacity, but there are trains running on this corridor. Since the award, from that 482 trips, we've now done over 500 trips, 510 at end of September. And some of the other things that we've seen is that we've increased the number of local staff. If you compare from like December to now. We've added 24 additional staff. That just shows that there is growth. Even after that dip, the markets are recovering, commodities, with the electric cars and the need for copper. The world just needs copper. And that's the main commodity being moved here. Also, we've introduced the first female driver into this operation. So that's something we're really proud of. So these are some of the benefits that we see coming through there. And again, we are seeing more demand for trains in the region. So we purchased some locomotives last year, and they're being deployed into this region. If you follow some of the railway-based publications, you might have picked that up, that we're deploying. But also, you might have picked up that some wagon manufacturers have received orders for additional wagon sets that will service that region. So that just points to the outcomes of this one corridor working further unlocks other opportunities, even for the region, not just necessarily for these two countries. So we're really proud to play a role in that. So the client, if I can call it that, which is the owner of the infrastructure, they're very proud of this, and they must be commended for having the vision to open up this piece of railway to private operators. Because what it has done, as I alluded to in the previous slide, is that it has unlocked some investments. There are many more inquiries for rail service in the region, and there are currently ongoing discussions with intergovernment between different governments for reinvestment and revitalization of this corridor, because it is quite a vital one. Yes, there are other corridors coming up all over Africa and port developments, but the TAZARA and Dar es Salaam port will always be quite a major feature for that region. So we're really happy to operate on this as Calabash and under the Calabash banner. And another thing to note is that the success of this allowed the introduction of additional operators on the line, and we're really happy to see that, because it kind of confirms the business case that it's still there. The freight is still there, the line capacity is still there, and we feel that the introduction of other operators just cements rail's position in the movement of freight.
Yes, given.
Especially on this corridor.
Suppose it.
So you'll see that the board actually issued that as part of a statement. This is something that I was kind of moving back and forth, was in terms of what we learned, but at the end of the day is that partnerships between us, the infrastructure owner, and the maintenance of the line, and being able to report defects on certain sections and them being fixed, the use of facilities, those are the ingredients to what makes this a success. It's in no ways a sort of cowboy loner approach. It's really teamwork. And another thing that it has demonstrated is that private rail access or third-party access, open access, however you term it, can be successful. And we believe that this Calabash service is a shining light and a good example of how that can be executed. There's benefit also on the infrastructure owner's side in terms of access fees, but then also that balancing that responsibility with keeping the line in a good condition. So the ports as well are quite important, because they also support this operation by investing into the ports, because the more you can move cargo to to a certain port, the more you need to make it efficient, loading, investment in other loading equipment, making sure that there are enough vessel calls there, and just boosting that pipeline to make sure that it's an end-to-end solution, not just running it to the port and then more delays. So there's also great work being done by the Tanzanian Ports Authority there, and our customers obviously for continuously investing in this solution. Just quickly, just to touch on some of the other benefits that we see, we as a company that's operated for more than three decades, it's that you have this experience within, and you then need to transfer that skill in one form or another. But we've seen that what we've come across is a lot of driver training because of this new demand from even the current operators and new operators, where they need to train their staff on the certain locomotives. There've been purchases of locomotives in SA by new operators that are operating in that region, and they need training. So we've trained in Zambia, we've trained in the DRC, we've trained in Tanzania, and it's such a wonderful thing to impart that skill, because once they have it, nobody can ever take it away from them, and it is quite a specialized thing. You can imagine driving a train is quite something. You've got all these train forces acting on it. You need to know when to brake, route knowledge, and the like. So we are glad that we are doing our bit in terms of contributing to skills development in that region. Even from a technical perspective, we obviously also hire local staff. The operation was quite expatriate heavy in the beginning due to not really having a view of what skills are available. But over the years, we found that there are actually right people in the country, that skills transfer is taking place, and the composition of the staff is now quite locally centered as well. So that's something we're very, very proud of. Let me just move to the next slide. So what does the future hold? So there's I don't know to call it a renaissance, but there is that rekindling of this railways and what it can do in the logistics sector, and to unlock these other opportunities. There are a lot of mining developments there, and we're seeing that this corridor is playing quite a big role in what's happening there. So the line is quite important to the region, not only for the copper, but there are mining reagents that come into there. There's fuel as well, and rail is really a solution to move all of this cargo that's needed. I mean, you can just imagine the population in the DRC and neighboring countries of Zambia and the likes. So we want to operate as Calabash more corridors. We want to unlock more downstream opportunities and upstream opportunities for some of the mines, and we hope that this service has proven that through collaboration, it is possible to really unlock value, even where it was thought that things cannot be done. So we look forward to further expansion and the growth of Africa, increasing this footprint. We are seeing a lot of work. We are seeing a lot of new projects coming up, and we hope we can support them as the Calabash service. So on that note, I'd just like to thank everyone who's attended once again, including Africa Supply Chain Excellence Awards, for recognizing this project as a winner in that category. Also, a big thank you to the team, Calabash team, Traxtion team, for doing the work that allowed us to even be confident enough to submit this with other world-class projects. So it's a big congratulations to Calabash Freight team, Traxtion team, for all the hard work they put in, away from their families, and it's really great to be part of this. Thank you.
Wow, Morris, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. And I'm sure we're going to have a few questions, but a very, very worthy winner of our Excellence in Transport Award. So well done on that. So I'm going to open up the floor. Does anyone have any questions for Morris? You can raise your hand or you can drop it in the chat. So while we're waiting to see if anyone has any questions, I have a question for you, Morris. So, I mean, it's such a revolutionary project to have a working rail system like that. And as a logistics professional, you know, you need to utilize all modes of transport. What do you think, you know, we need for some of this to be implemented in South Africa to have a few more successful projects on our side? What is your learnings that, you know, you could share with us, and what do you think it's going to take? If you had a magic wand, what do you think it's going to take to get it up and running correctly?
Well, railways are inherently complex.
Mm.
You look at a train, you know, you've got engines that pull this load, and the load can be flatbeds, it can be bulk wagons, it can be refrigerated containers, like what we see sometimes with the citrus. It's very complex operations, and where we run, it's a single line between the two countries. But SA's network is far more complex, so it's a different story altogether. Just purely just on the complexity, and then you obviously have you know, issues of what access would look like, how it would work. We're still trialing that, and I think the current environment is enabling for that. There's been a phase one of third-party access. It's well on its way, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, even from a safety perspective, safety critical working. How do you then introduce not one, not two, but perhaps even 10 new operators? How will they communicate? We have the communication systems for these trains to see each other on the network to avoid collisions. So I think at first is an enabling framework in terms of operations, safety, and the operations really sorts itself out. I'm talking day to day now. Once that framework is in and everybody knows what they do, what the rules are, what access is, and the likes, and obviously the right people to be able to move these goods.
Fantastic. Mike, I see you've got your hand up. Mike is also one of our judges of the Africa Supply Chain Excellence Awards.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I think maybe I should try and answer your question because you know, it shows that we've got the operational and technical skills to operate, you know, and even within Transnet Freight Rail, and I see we've got a number of Transnet Freight Rail people on this. What it needs is political will. You know, if there's no political will, or we're busy playing politics, then it's virtually impossible to operate at the operational and technical level. And I think Traxtion have shown that it can be done. We have the skills locally, we have the technical ability, but unless we get the politics right, you know, the market is going to suffer. And this is where people like John Katorna, you know, is very strong in terms of the outside-in approach. You know, what does the market need to function properly? You know, and you gear your services and your operations to, in fact, deliver on that. And we particularly Transnet Freight Rail, and I acknowledge all the kind of issues they've got going on internally, is very much an inside-out approach. You know, we'll get our house in order, and you just take what we give you, and it's not working. So I think if I could answer that, because you know, Traxtion can't answer that. They're very much in the on the receiving end of the lack of political will. So I think we need to get our house in order, and you know, if those people from Transnet Freight Rail are sort of, who are on the line, can sort of start putting some kind of pressure, you know, sort of upward pressure probably, you know, we might get somewhere. But to me, you know, operationally we can do it. You know, both with people like Traxtion and the operational staff within Transnet Freight Rail. But unless we get the hierarchy and the politics right, we're going nowhere fast, and it's showing, unfortunately.
Thanks.
But well done to Traxtion.
Thanks, Mike.
This was just one of their entries. They operate outside South Africa in a number of sub-Saharan African countries. And look, they've obviously been through a learning curve, but well done to them. Well done to them. They show we can do it.
Thanks, Mike. Rainer, I see you've got your hands up.
Good afternoon, Rainer Kotze from Transnet Engineering. Thanks for sharing this success story with us. Just a question on the infrastructure. Have you had any challenges, derailments over this period that you were operating, and how is the condition? I think sometimes one has got this picture in your head that track conditions in Africa is not very well maintained, but how did it impact on your operations? Thank you.
Thanks, Rhino. I think you from TFR or Transnet, you engineering, you'll know that derailments are inevitable in this environment. We have had, but nothing, catastrophic. But we have found that because of the location of this TAZARA line, there's a lot of rainfall, and we'd find that you have washaways. So obviously there's an engineering solution to deal with the buildup of water and all of that, and regular maintenance. But we haven't had anything catastrophic, just minor derailments. So those 510 trips that I mentioned were all relatively successful without any major issues. But we would find out that there's a washaway where now operations stop completely until they repair that. In terms of signaling, there's it's the old way of working. It's not color light signaling or anything like that. So it's track occupation, track warrant, and the likes. So it's not it's a single line. So that does not densify. You can't run trains very close to one another there. But yeah, that's kind of the environment we see there from the track infrastructure. It's also, if you there's a wonderful documentary on YouTube that talks about that. It's got a lot of bridges. I think, I can't recall the number, but it's over 20 bridges and just as many tunnels, if not more. So it's quite a challenging track. I think Johan's on the line. If maybe he would like to add something around the sort of environment that it is. Maybe Johan, if you can just say a few words.
Thank you. Yes, it's a 1,980 kilometers of track in it, and we have our challenges. There are all portions of the line that's not very good, that we've got speed restrictions on. Overall, there are good areas that we can still travel at 50 kilometers an hour. The mountain area is only 30 kilometers an hour. That's about 502 kilometers of mountain areas, and there are a lot more than 20 bridges and tunnels. There are some beautiful scenery as well, between Mbaya and Malimba on that line. I believe that's one of the reasons why the Raufoss Rail is so successful on that line, with passengers, is because of the scenery. I always say that's where Tarzan met Jane. Is somewhere between Malimba and Mbaya.
Sure, that sounds very interesting.
It is beautiful.
Nikhil, I see in the chat you've got quite a few questions. Would you like to ask maybe just one or two directly of Morris? Are you still on the call?
Yes, sure, no worries. Give me a moment to just pull him up. I think my main questions, thanks so much for the presentation and congratulations on this achievement. I think, as you see, I'm from Transnet as well, so this is very relevant to us right now. I think my two main questions would be, how did the state of TAZARA in 2018, when you started this project, compare to South Africa now? And how does the private model work, especially in terms of running maybe a mixture of private and public, or let's say TAZARA-owned vehicles, drivers on the network? So how do you balance with TAZARA their business needs versus the private business needs in terms of allocation of slots?
Okay, thanks for that. So just starting with the state of the infrastructure, you know, I don't think you can actually compare the two, because you would know just how many route kilometers we have, never mind the entire network we have over South Africa. I think it's quoted at saying maybe over 70%, 80% of Africa's rail infrastructure sits in South Africa. So it's a lot, and that's branch lines, that's main lines, that's heavy haul lines. So to compare it to TAZARA is I wouldn't like to make that comparison, but we found that the track was good enough for us to run, and hence why we've run up until now 500 trains. In SA, because we've got electrified lines as well, they do create some challenges in terms of electric locomotives not being able to run, or hookups or the likes. But to draw a direct comparison, it would be a bit of a challenge. Topography is also very different. We here also sometimes have double lines as well, whereas that's a single line. We've got signaling systems. So it can't, for me at least, I wouldn't want to compare the two. Then secondly, I think your question was around access. So TAZARA still run their own trains. They still have their own drivers, still have their own staff complement. I believe the nameplate capacity of that line was quoted at 5 million tons per annum. So that is way off to what's being done now. So there's still room for more trains to run. So there's no real kind of stepping on each other's toes. It's all done fair and equitably. Your slot when you're given the authority to leave, you run. Communication takes place in terms of what you can do, where there's speed restrictions. And one thing I must mention is that there are passenger trains also running there. They obviously take priority. So when there's a passenger train, you just have to find the nearest siding and sort of wait for that to pass. So it's done at the convenience of the passengers, which is understandable. And then, but from a freight perspective, it's still fair, it's still equitable, and we're not having any issues there. And I think for even if we look at locally, that can be replicated. We've got a lot of infrastructure and stations as well. So the crossing of trains where there's a single line, I don't think it'll be a problem. Barring the other challenges of how long is the train, can it fit in that specific passing loop or siding? But yeah, it's definitely possible. Fair and equitable is possible.
Thanks, Morris, for that. Colin, I see you have your hand up. You would like to ask Morris a question?
Yes, thanks for the presentation, Morris. If I'm not mistaken, the Zambian railhead for TAZARA is Kapiri-Mposhi. Is that correct? Okay, but your main cargo is copper, and the copper doesn't come from Kapiri-Mposhi. So do your wagons actually do they get loaded at the mines and pulled by another rail company down to your railhead, or do you transfer? How does it work?
Yep. So we've got a great partnerships. I think Gavin touched on it in the beginning, that there are road logistics companies that would bring the copper to that warehouse that's based in Kapiri and Ndola area. So the wagons are loaded there, as opposed to going into the likes of the DRC and elsewhere where the mines are. So we've got collaboration, because at the end of the day, there are only a few mines that would have rail lines running into them. And I'm talking out of SA. Sometimes you do need that link with the road logistics to work together for a consolidation hub. You know, the hub and spoke approach, where the spokes are being the trucks feeding the consolidation point, where the paperwork is done, clearing is done, maintenance is done, because you also need to have a look at those wagons, the wheels, the brake blocks, any pipes missing. So, you know, that's an opportunity for you to do that, do some maintenance, running maintenance on them. And the warehouses are fed by road logistics at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Okay, super. I see we've got a career question here from Savania, and I think just to sum it up, because it's quite a long question, Savania, I'll address it offline with Morris, but just to say that she's a female BCom student of supply chain management, and just asking some advice on what courses could she do to make her attractive to future employees. You know, it's mentioned here about artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, but I think in your experience and in your space that you operate, what would you feel is a great skill to add to your CV as a young student embarking in this very, very demanding field of logistics, but very exciting field of logistics?
Please just repeat what she's a BCom in?
BCom in supply chain management.
In supply chain, okay. So just something funny enough, I was exchanging emails with Johan yesterday, and I said, where can I apply to be an apprentice diesel electric fitter? Because there's a shortage in that field. And you know, the reality is that developing nations need hands to work to develop them. So the trades are quite important in this. So having said that, and our other entry into the African Supply Chain Awards was based on training of artisans and train drivers and the likes, because there is a huge shortage and a skills mismatch, and a lot of the older generations are leaving that. But it's more so it's more so in that technical skills, but it's also happening in the managerial side of things. So as a BCom supply chain student, you know, you'd also have the more experienced people starting to leave, you know, employment for aging or whatever the case is. But essentially, supply chain is very broad, and Africa at the moment, I feel, is a bit more focused on the moving of the goods, not necessarily the information. So you spoke of artificial intelligence, you know, perhaps bolstering up your skill sets when it comes to the IT side of supply chain, because you're moving all these goods, but where's the data to analyze? You know, it's often said you can't improve what you don't measure. So from a supply chain perspective, saying, how can I take my supply chain qualification and marry it to something that has to do with, you know, analytics and business intelligence modeling as well? Because at that stage, it tends to be a bit theoretical, which is why I was quite fortunate to be absorbed into a graduate program that put me on the ground. I was in PPE and a hard hat at a terminal, learning how things work. So even likewise for somebody that's as broad as supply chain, find a niche, whether it's FMCG, whether it's procurement, even whether, you know, it's road logistics, or supply chain. There's even now niche areas like, you know, enterprise development within supply chain. So it's supply development. So there's find your niche and then just master that, so that when an opportunity does arise, you're not this generic supply chain student, but you can say, you know, I chose to venture into this. So, you know, I ventured into rail.
I can definitely vouch for that. Being a sustainable supply chain specialist and looking at green supply chains was quite an outlier when I started, and now it's becoming more mainstream. But before, I was considered this crazy greenie lady who loves trucks and logistics. So, you know,
exactly.
I think there's a lot of careers coming up, and I think resilience is a really important skill, especially in this space. Before I close, I just want to check, are there any further questions for Morris? You've answered all your questions really beautifully and well put. So I don't know if there are any other further comments or questions from the audience. Okay, fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Morris, thank you for your fantastic presentation. Just a reminder, I mean, you guys won the Excellence in Transport Award. This is year 2 of the Africa Supply Chain Awards. And what the awards really wants to do is showcase and highlight success stories in Africa. And I think it's so important, just coming off the Transport and Logistics Evolution conference that was now recently held. I mean, there was a lot of Africa presence, and the talk was all about corridors and collaboration and working together. And I think, you know, there's a lot of opportunity, but there are also a lot of challenges, but challenges also breed opportunity. So that's pretty exciting. And just to please, I've dropped our website address for Askia in the chat. Go and have a look. In 2022, we had 67 entries, and last year we actually had 92 entries from 26 countries in Africa. So it's really, really exciting to see the growth and the interest that the awards has created, and to also highlight these kind of case studies and then share the learnings with you, the audience, moving forward. So we're really, really looking forward to the next award cycle, and I encourage you to contact Claire if you guys, anyone's interested in sponsoring the awards, or if you're interested in entering any entries, please go onto our website. We have an online entry portal there. And yeah, if there are no further questions, I'd really like to wrap up. And thanks to Jenny and Claire, my fellow directors, as well, for your support and getting the website, the webinar up and running. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Morris. Really big round of applause. It was a great webinar, and we look forward to sharing our future webinars shortly. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye.